The Federal Reserve just spoke. The entire world watched. And I am here to tell you they were watching the wrong event, because the number that will actually decide what your gold and silver are worth over the coming weeks does not arrive today. It arrives tomorrow morning at 8:30, while most of the country is still pouring its first cup of coffee, and it is going to land with almost none of the fanfare that surrounded today's announcement. The crowd just spent its energy on the loud event. The decisive one is still coming quietly in a few hours. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why the thing everyone ignored tomorrow matters more than the thing everyone obsessed over today. Stay with me, because this is the single most useful piece of timing I can give you this week. And almost nobody is talking about it. And here is the twist, the part I want to hand you right now instead of making you wait, because it reframes everything. Today's Federal Reserve decision was, in the language of the market, almost entirely priced in. Everyone expected roughly what they got. And when an event is fully expected, it barely moves the price, no matter how dramatic it looks on the news. The real fuel for a big move is surprise. And surprise does not come from the event everyone has already braced for. It comes from the one they have not. Tomorrow morning, the government releases the Federal Reserve's own favorite measure of inflation. And unlike today's decision, this number genuinely can surprise in either direction. And it is that surprise, not today's headline, that has the power to send gold and silver lurching. The loud event is behind us. The market-moving event is still ahead. But before I go further, I want to know who is in the room with me right now. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And tell me honestly what you are holding. Gold, silver, cash, waiting on the sidelines. Tell me, because I read these. And the mix of answers in the hours after a Fed decision tells its own story about who is calm and who is rattled. And I promise you, I will come back to what those answers mean before we are done. Let us start with the machine at the center of all this, because you cannot understand why tomorrow matters without understanding the lever the Fed pulls. The Federal Reserve's most powerful tool is the interest rate, the price of money itself. Raise it and borrowing gets expensive. Saving gets rewarded. Money gets scarce. Lower it and money turns cheap and plentiful. And this single lever, more than almost anything else on earth, governs the fate of gold and silver. For one reason you must hold on to if you are to understand anything about this market. Gold and silver pay you nothing. They earn no interest, no dividend. They simply sit there. So when interest rates are high, holding metal carries a hidden cost, because every dollar sitting in gold is a dollar not earning that attractive interest somewhere else. Economists call it opportunity cost. And it is the invisible weight that presses on gold whenever rates rise or are expected to rise. But when rates fall or are expected to fall, that weight lifts. The bond paying almost nothing looks no better than the metal paying nothing. And gold, freed of its disadvantage, tends to climb. Rate expectations up, gold pressured. Rate expectations down, gold released. That seesaw is the beating heart of this entire market. And almost everything else is noise laid on top of it. Now, here's the crucial link, the one that connects tomorrow's quiet number to that powerful lever. The Fed does not set interest rates by whim. It sets them primarily in response to one thing above all others: inflation. When inflation runs hot, the Fed feels pressure to raise rates or hold them high to cool it down. When inflation cools, the Fed gains room to lower rates. So inflation data is not just a statistic. It is the fuel that determines which way that all-important lever gets pulled next. And tomorrow morning, we get the most important inflation reading of them all. The one the Federal Reserve itself watches more closely than any other. If you are finding this useful already, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, because now I need to explain why this particular inflation number carries more weight than the one you usually hear about on the news, and why the Fed trusts it above all others. Most people, when they think of inflation, think of the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, the figure that makes headlines each month. But the Federal Reserve has a different favorite, a measure with a clunky name, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, the PCE, And the reason the Fed prefers it matters, the PCE, is broader. It captures how people actually change their behavior when prices rise, how they substitute one good for another, how their real spending shifts. The Fed considers it a truer picture of underlying inflation than the headline CPI. So when the Fed sits down to decide whether to raise, hold, or cut rates, the number it stares at hardest is this one. And that number for the month just passed drops tomorrow morning at 8:30, which means that while today's decision told you what the Fed did based on what it already knew, tomorrow's number begins to tell you what the Fed will do next. One is history. The other is the future, arriving quietly while the crowd looks the other way. And there is one more layer to why this moment is so charged, and it centers on the man now running the Federal Reserve. The current chairman is known throughout his career as a hawk, someone deeply focused on stamping out inflation, someone who has said plainly that he has no tolerance for it and that it remains too high. That reputation has been part of what has weighed on gold this year, because a hawkish chairman means the market expects rates to stay high. But this chairman did something remarkable at his first meeting. When every member of the committee was asked to privately write down where they expect rates to go, he declined to submit his own projection. He left it blank, the single most important voice in the room, withheld his own forecast, a quiet signal that even he is genuinely uncertain about the path ahead. And when the man steering the ship will not tell you which way he is turning, every incoming piece of data, especially tomorrow's inflation number, becomes something the entire market will seize upon, desperate to read the direction he refused to give. Let me make this real with two people, because these forces only matter when you see how they land in an actual life. Neither is real, but both are the kind of person you might recognize, perhaps in the mirror. The first I will call Walter, 69, retired. And Walter did what a huge number of people did today. He sat glued to the television at 2 o'clock, heart pounding, watching the Fed announcement as if his entire future hung on it, ready to buy or sell in a rush based on the headline. And then, having spent all his attention and all his nerves on the loud event, he will wake up tomorrow, go about his morning, and completely miss the 8:30 release that actually carries the power to move his metal. Walter watches the fireworks and sleeps through the earthquake. He reacts to what is loud, not to what is important. And it is a pattern that has cost him again and again. The second person I will call Frances, 66, and she is not richer than Walter and not smarter about economics. She simply understands the difference between loud and important. She barely blinked at today's announcement because she knew it was largely priced in. Instead, she has tomorrow morning circled because she understands that the quiet inflation number is the one that shapes what comes next. But here is the deeper thing about Frances, the thing that truly separates her. Even as she watches tomorrow's number with interest, she is not afraid of it, because the reason she owns her gold in the first place does not rest on any single data release. She watches the number to understand the weather, not because it changes the reason she built her shelter. The difference between Walter and Frances is not knowledge. It is the wisdom to know which events are signal and which are noise, and the calm to hold steady through both. Now, why is it so hard to be Frances and so easy to be Walter? The answer is not weakness. It is biology, and understanding it is one of the most useful things I can give you today. When you own something and you brace for news that might move its price, the part of your brain that processes physical threat, the same ancient machinery that once helped your ancestors survive a predator, fires off before the rational thinking part of your brain can catch up. A looming economic release does not register in your body as an abstract data point. It registers as danger. Your body floods with the chemistry of stress, which screams one instruction: do something, act now, protect yourself. This is why so many people make their worst decisions in exactly these charged moments, because they are not deciding at all. They are reacting, driven by machinery, superbly built for fleeing lions and catastrophically wrong for holding a long-term position through a noisy week. The investors who thrive are not the ones who feel no fear. They are the ones who recognize that surge of urgency for what it is, a reflex, and who let it pass without obeying it. And I want to single out silver here for a moment, because if you own it, tomorrow's number matters to you even more than it does to the gold holder, and almost nobody explains why. Silver carries a kind of double sensitivity that gold does not. When rate expectations shift, silver tends to move 2 to 3 times as much as gold in percentage terms in both directions. It is the more volatile, more energetic cousin. So if tomorrow's inflation number comes in cool and rate fears ease, silver can leap far harder than gold. And if it comes in hot and rate fears intensify, silver can fall far harder too. But silver has a second engine gold lacks, because more than half of all silver demand is industrial, consumed physically by solar panels, electronics, electric vehicles, and the data centers powering the artificial intelligence. Boom. That industrial demand runs on a completely different clock than the Fed, a clock measured in years of building and manufacturing, and it does not care what tomorrow's number says. So silver is pulled by 2 forces at once: the short-term rate seesaw that tomorrow's data feeds, and the long-term industrial hunger that grinds on regardless. Understanding that silver is a different instrument with sharper swings and a second engine is the difference between panicking at its volatility and understanding it. It is not simply a cheaper gold, it is its own animal, and tomorrow's number will make it dance harder than anything else you own. Now let me be honest and careful with you, because I will not insult you with fear. And this subject draws people who want to frighten you into acting. I cannot tell you what tomorrow's number will say, and neither can anyone else, including the loudest voices promising certainty. It is entirely possible. The inflation reading comes in exactly as expected, and the market barely moves. It is possible it comes in cooler than expected, easing the pressure on rates, and gold catches a lift. It is possible it comes in hotter, reinforcing the hawkish fear, and metal takes another dip. Anyone who tells you they know which of these will happen is guessing and dressing the guess as knowledge, and they deserve your suspicion. What I am giving you is not a prediction. It is an understanding of the machinery, so that whatever the number says tomorrow, you can read it calmly instead of reacting to it in a panic. Let me give you something practical then, a way to actually read tomorrow rather than just brace for it. When that number lands at 8:30, do not just look at whether inflation went up or down. Look at whether it came in above or below what the market expected, because that gap, the surprise, is what moves price. If inflation comes in hotter than expected, the market will brace for the Fed to stay tough on rates, and gold will likely feel that downward weight. If it comes in cooler than expected, the market will begin to hope for relief, for rate cuts on the horizon, and that weight will start to lift off gold. The actual number matters less than the number relative to what everyone was betting on. That is the real signal. And now you know how to read it, which puts you ahead of the vast majority of people who will simply see a headline and react. And here is a deeper force underneath all of this, one that puts a ceiling on how hard the Fed can really lean. And it is worth understanding because it shapes everything the chairman can and cannot do. The United States government now carries a national debt of more than $39 trillion, and the annual interest bill on that debt alone has climbed past $1 trillion a year. Sit with that for a moment. Every time the Fed raises interest rates to fight inflation, it also raises the cost the government pays to borrow, which means higher rates do not just cool the economy, they blow a bigger and bigger hole in the government's own budget. This is the trap the chairman is caught in. He may want to stay hawkish, to keep rates high, to crush inflation. But every month rates stay high, the debt grows more expensive to service, and the pressure to eventually cut rates and ease that burden builds. This is part of why so many sophisticated investors believe that whatever happens in any single meeting or any single inflation report, the long-term direction must eventually bend toward looser money, toward tolerating a bit more inflation, toward a slowly weakening dollar. because the alternative, keeping rates high forever on a mountain of debt like this, is simply unsustainable. And a slowly weakening dollar over the long run is precisely the environment in which gold has historically preserved its value, while paper money bled its away. Tomorrow's number is a single data point in that vast, slow story. And understanding the story is what lets you hold your nerve through any single point in it. And here is the piece that puts all of this short-term drama in its proper place. The piece I most want you to carry away. While ordinary investors spend this week panicking over a Fed decision and an inflation number, the largest and most sophisticated buyers on the planet, the central banks of entire nations have been doing the exact opposite. They have been buying gold steadily, quarter after quarter, at a pace not seen in generations. A recent survey of these institutions found that the highest share in the survey's history expect to keep increasing their gold reserves in the year ahead. Think about what that means. The most informed money in the world is calmly accumulating the very metal that ordinary investors dump in fear over each Fed meeting. They are not watching tomorrow's 8:30 release the way Walter watches it. They are buying for reasons that operate across decades, rooted in a world staggering under record debt. And they treat the fear-driven dips as a chance to buy more. When you feel the urge to panic this week, remember who is quietly on the other side of that trade, calmly buying what the frightened are selling. Ask yourself what they understand that the panicking crowd does not. There is history here too, worth knowing, because it shows how this plays out over time. Go back to the 1970s, a decade of raging inflation and a Federal Reserve struggling to contain it. Through that period, gold did not rise in a straight line. It lurched, it corrected, it terrified people out of their positions, again and again, on the back of individual data releases and policy meetings. And yet across the full decade, it climbed from around $35 an ounce to over $800, an extraordinary rise, precisely because the underlying disease, a loss of confidence in paper money, never healed. No matter how many individual Fed meetings and inflation reports came and went. The lesson is not that history repeats exactly, because it never does. The lesson is that the daily noise of data releases, terrifying as each one feels in the moment, is very often just static laid over a much deeper and slower signal. The people who heard only the static sold and regretted it. The people who understood the signal held on. So let us pull it all together and go back to that quiet number arriving tomorrow morning. Today's Federal Reserve decision was the loud event, largely priced in, and therefore limited in how much it could move the market. Tomorrow morning at 8:30, the Fed's own preferred inflation measure arrives with far less fanfare and far more power to surprise. And it is surprise that moves gold and silver. That number matters especially now because the hawkish chairman running the Fed left his own rate projection blank, leaving the market starving for direction and ready to seize on every data point to find it. Whether tomorrow's number lands hot or cold relative to expectations will shape where rate expectations go next. And with them, the short-term fate of your metal. And through all of it, far from the noise, the central banks of the world keep buying gold, calmly for reasons that make any single morning's data release almost beside the point. So here is what I want you to carry away, framed as plainly as I know how. Tomorrow's number will likely move the price, perhaps sharply, and neither I nor anyone else can tell you in advance which way. But the price moving is not the same as the reason for owning changing. If you hold gold and silver as protection against a world of staggering debt and uncertain money, then a single inflation report, however important to traders, does not alter that reason. This does not mean you should ignore tomorrow. And it certainly does not mean you should pour your savings into metal in a panic over one data release, because volatility is real and stability matters, especially in retirement. It means you should decide right now, tonight, which time scale you are actually playing on so that when the number hits tomorrow morning, you are Francis and not Walter. The right decision depends entirely on your own circumstances, and I am not here to tell you what it is, only to make sure you meet tomorrow with understanding instead of fear. Do not let anyone use tomorrow's number to stampede you into a rushed move or a costly product, because they will try, and they will grow louder as 8:30 approaches. And equally, do not let the fear of a falling price blind you to what the most sophisticated institutions in the world are quietly doing on the other side of that fear. Those are different errors, and the truth sits calmly between them. None of this is financial advice. And every fact I have cited, the timing of tomorrow's release, why the Fed favors this inflation measure, the chairman's blank projection, the central bank buying, is in the pinned comment, so you can verify every word of it yourself rather than take mine. I open by telling you the whole world just watched the wrong event, and that the number that truly matters arrives tomorrow morning while most people are still waking up. Now you understand why the quiet release outweighs the loud one, and why a chairman who would not reveal his own hand has left the entire market hanging on what that number says. So let me leave you with the question underneath all of it. When the loud event is behind you and the important one is still ahead, are you Walter, glued to the fireworks and asleep for the earthquake? Or are you Francis, calm, awake, and watching the thing that actually matters? The answer costs nothing to decide tonight, and it may be worth a great deal to have decided before 8:30 tomorrow morning.